Welcome to the LDN Radio Show, brought to you by the LDN Research Trust. I'm your host, Linda Elseygood. I have an exciting lineup of guest speakers who are LDN experts in their field. We will be discussing low-dose Naltrexone and its many uses in autoimmune diseases, cancers, etc. Thank you for joining us. Today we're joined by pain specialist, Dr. Asher Goldstein from New Jersey. Thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Linda. How are you? Good,
thank you. So could you tell us what's been happening in your practice with LDN and pain?
So, and I've been in practice now just about 15 years and only started using LDN about 2.5 years ago. It's actually interesting is that I just attended a conference on Friday 2 days ago. And when I last attended that conference in 2019, which was, BC, before COVID, I had no even thought of LDN. I remember just flashing back to those 3 years previous, there was nothing about LDN said. I had nothing in my recollection about LDN. And interestingly enough, 3 years ago, I went as an attendee, and this year I was invited to speak about LDN. So they were very curious, and out of about 100 doctors, pain specialists, only about 5 had even heard about LDN. So it was a very receptive audience with a lot of questions and answers, during the non-technical sessions just floating around. So it was very good, and hopefully there'll be 95 other doctors that can help their patients as well. In regard to my LDN use and prescribing in the pharmacy, it's developed and transformed dramatically over the past 2.5 years that I've been using it. I've shifted in how I prescribe the low dose naltrexone. I've gone to a much lower and slower, titration pack. I started a 0.5 milligram. I only go up by a 0.5 milligram a week. I have a compound pharmacy that has made a Dr. Goldstein titration pack, and by and large, the issues that patients had previously with side effects are 99% gone. I think I've had 1 or 2 patients stop LDN because of side effects in the last year. And so that's nearly gone. Everybody reports dreams at some point in time, but when they're warned about it, it's usually not an issue. At most, the patients will move their once-a-day medication to the morning as opposed to the evening. And then generally those patients move it back to the evening, a few weeks later. But I've really branched out and started using the LDN in many, many applications, especially with patients they come to me, not necessarily all the time with a specific diagnosis. I'll have patients come, they've been in pain for 15 years, 20 years. They've had, a rheumatologic test here or there that sometimes shows something, sometimes doesn't. They don't have anything specific. They're feeling run down. They're feeling exhausted. Then they're in pain, and nothing else has worked. And LDN seems to work very much for these patients, even though they don't have specific diagnoses. I'm not even counting, the patients that we're treating from a pain perspective, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, Crohn's, the list is big. It's big, and hopefully we'll get bigger. The list that we have people that we can treat. I'm treating people also even with non-painful conditions, right? I have a patient came with Haley. My dermatologist friend was very upset with me because he's like, that's supposed to be for me. I'm like, I use LDN. He's like, hey, I use LDN too. How do you know that? It was very funny. And then polycystic ovary syndrome. Some patients have come referred from different pharmacies. So even non-painful patients or patients without pain are coming just for the LDN. And sometimes I read extensively about it in the beginning, and you're like, okay, I think I should use this. But then as a practitioner, once you actually see the proof in the pudding, it's amazing. Just amazing for me. It's completely transformed my practice, and where some of the more not difficult patients, but I would just say some of the more patients with difficult to treat pain syndromes are less difficult to treat pain syndromes now. So it's been fantastic.
So the $1 million question that everybody asks is, I've been on pain medications for the last 20 years. Those pain medications aren't working. I'd like to try LDN. How can I go about starting?
So, I tell the patient, what they'll usually say to me is the pain medications, help me get around, but they don't really treat me well enough. Like they allow me to get out of bed, so that I tell them, a hammer can also put a screw into the wall, but a much better tool will be the screwdriver, right? And it makes less of a mess. Hammer, so the opiates are the hammer. And yeah, so it's hard to, so it takes, you can either go the quick way, which is a little more difficult, or you can go the slower way, which is difficult in its own way. But look, if somebody's been on opiate medication for 50, 20 years, they have to significantly reduce their load. Some doctors will want them to be completely off pain medication. I find that if we can reduce it to maybe 40 or 50 morphine milligram equivalents, MMEs, and people can look up what MMEs are online in regard to their particular medication and how to convert it to MMEs. There are conversion calculators, but usually about 40 to 50 MMEs can still be handled with LDN as long as it's not extended release medication. So for example, oxycodone, a combination with acetaminophen, also sometimes known as Endocet or Percocet in the United States. So if somebody's taking 7.5 milligrams twice a day or 3 times a day, I can actually work that in together with LDN. I tell my patients, as long as you're not taking the opiate medication 4 hours before or 4 hours after your LDN, you should be okay. You can take it the other 16 hours of the day as long as you need, if you need to. So for example, if they go to sleep at 10 p.m. and that's when they take their LDN, their last Percocet can be at 6 p.m. and the first one could be at 2 a.m. if they wake up in the middle of the night. But between 8 p.m. and 2 a.m. in this particular example, they can't take it. Now, if somebody's on a higher dosage of that, they have to reduce it or eliminate it. And that could either be done over time with slow titration, or that could be done through medication-assisted withdrawal using Suboxone. Both of them have their pluses and minuses. The Suboxone is quicker, but it usually requires a patient to go through 24 to 36 hours of moderate discomfort. I call it going through the ring of fire until the Suboxone kicks in order to help the patients. The other way is 2 to 3 month taper of lowering the opiates while not getting the LDN yet, which can also be uncomfortable. But it can be done. The bottom line is you don't have to eliminate it completely. It just has to be reduced.
Okay. So what have the outcomes been, as in a time frame for LDN to actually start to work?
So it's a huge variety of time onset. I mean, I've seen as quick as a week. I've seen as long as 6 months. It's really, the main thing is talking to the patients, realistic expectations, and setting an education, meaning patients have to understand that there's many different ways that people respond to the medication. Typically, patients with fibromyalgia go quicker. patients with things like polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS take longer. I've seen the patients with Crohn's, those go pretty quick. So in general, the medication helps patients whose diseases have two things in common. The immune system dysfunction, I don't like to say autoimmune, I like the immune system dysfunction, as well as an inflammatory state. So those patients that have more inflammation, I find that more inflammation than immune system dysfunction, I find that the medication works quicker. And those patients that have more immune system dysfunction than inflammation, it takes longer. That's been my sort of empiric, view of what I've seen. And again, DNA is what really rules everything. So you can have, same disease, two different patients, and respond completely differently. My lowest dose of onset of action has been, I think, 0.3 milligrams. And I actually have one patient now, polycystic ovary syndrome patient, at 6.5 in the evening and 2 milligrams in the morning. So 8.5 milligrams. In the beginning, I would have never even thought that a patient could respond so low or a patient respond so high. But one thing I've learned about LDN is that don't ever put yourself in a box. Because LDN's, constantly, is evolving in my mind, and its use and how patients respond to it.
Mm-hmm. So you were saying there about the dosing range. Have you gone higher than 6.5 milligrams?
Not me, not personally. I have not had the need to, but I have, in as a single dose, I haven't gone higher than 6.5. But I have gone in a daily dose high, 6.5, yes.
Mm-hmm. So do you ever prescribe it more than twice a day?
Not yet.
Twice a day. Okay.
I'm open to it, but those patients that I've found the need for the twice a day, and it's usually the second dose is usually having to deal with mood or energy versus pain. So those patients, once we get the second dose in the morning, that usually stabilizes them. That's typically why I'm giving a second dose. It's not necessarily for the pain, but more for the mood and energy.
Mm-hmm. And as you say, everybody is individual. The dosing is individual. There are some doctors that are prescribing getting the patient stable, let's say on 4.5 milligrams, and then they will do a second dose in the morning of 4.5, and you're doing it at a lower dose in the morning, but higher in the evening. And it is so patient dependent on what works best for that patient. How long would you say it takes to find that right dose for a patient?
The right dose can, again, as quick as a week I've had. It's highly unusual, but that's the quickest. And I actually didn't believe the patient, so I sort of pushed them to go higher. Then they felt worse. And then I'm like, okay, listen to your own advice, listen to the patient. We went back down to 0.5 milligram. And as long as 6+ months, there's just a huge variety of responses. But like I said, the inflammatory state patients, they respond quicker. The more immune dysfunction patients take longer. But the majority of my patients that I've seen, they're having their disease 5, 10, 15 years. So these patients have a lot of patience typically. And as long as they perceive that the doctor is working together with them, listening to them, acknowledging. A lot of patients say to me, my family thinks I'm crazy. My doctors think I'm crazy. I'm like, you're not crazy. You have an atypical issue. And atypical issues are sometimes difficult to deal with. And when people don't want to deal with them, then sometimes we put names and labels on them.
So for those patients who are on a very low dose and LDN is working fine for them, do you try further down the road to increase that dose? or do you just
I'm a if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of person. So, so usually not. I actually had a patient in this morning who said to me, this is a person with a lot of both back issues as well as immune dysfunction issues, and basically it was fibromyalgia when he came in. And fibromyalgia is not a typical diagnosis in men, but this gentleman had it. He came in and I examined him. So he was operating, he said, at 20% capacity when he started. And now he's at 3 milligrams and he's operating at 70% capacity. And he's like, he says, I'm happy where I am. He says, I don't want to push it any further up or further down. I'm worried that if I go up, it'll be worse. He says, 70% is a huge change from where I was. So again, if a patient wants me to push a little bit, I always tell them, we can always move it. I can write 1/4 milligram pills and you can, gently push it up or down. You have that ability. It's not a medication that's fixed in any which way. And I speak to them that their need for the dose may increase or decrease with time. So they should just be aware that it's not fixed in stone. Mm-hmm. I even tell patients that 4.5 milligrams is just an aiming point. We have to aim somewhere. That's my aiming point,
So you can't see all the patients with pain around the world. What would you say to doctors who are presented with patients with pain who don't really know anything about LDN and don't feel confident prescribing it?
So if I was able to spend a half an hour of educating a doctor, I get much more return on investment than half an hour educating the patient, right? Because I can help one patient, but that doctor can help 100 patients a week, or I'm just saying. But that's why I really want to go to the conferences that are not LDN conferences and speak about LDN and encourage, doctors. I say, the upside is that it's relatively inexpensive, right? There is very few, if any, side effects, and very few, if any, drug interactions. The downside for doctors is that you got to talk to your patients. So some doctors don't like to do that, strangely enough, as bizarre as that sounds. But that's really the downside. Like, I'm having sometimes to convince a doctor to they're like, I don't have the 8 minutes to spend with the patient additionally to speak with them about LDN. But I'm like, well, first of all, you invest that 8 minutes and they're going to wind up coming to you much less, because complaining much less, taking up less of your time because their pain is less. I said, and if you can't do it, I said, send me your nurse practitioner or your physician assistant. Let me educate them and they can, help the patients. It doesn't have to be you, as long as the doctor is receptive, that there can be things that they don't quite understand and you can help. You don't always have to have, an exact formula on how to treat a patient. Sometimes if the disease is not exact, then the medication doesn't have to be exact.
So how can people get hold of you?
Me, they can call my office, Asher Goldstein with an A. They can Google me and you can find my phone number and they, make an appointment. And then, we could take it from there. If there are physicians that are listening to this, you want to spend some additional time with me, I'll spend half an hour, I'll go out to dinner, we'll have coffee, we'll figure something out. Because for me to help a medical professional understand that this is about as benign of a medication as possible, and it can help all those patients that when you see those patients on the list and you're like, oh my God, how am I going to help this person today, right? That's who I was. I wish I found this medication years ago. Maybe I wouldn't have ripped the hair out of my head, But like truly, I tell my patients, this medication doesn't do anything to you, which is why there are no side effects. They're like, well, why am I going to take it if it doesn't do anything to me? So I say this medication allows your body to start working for itself again. That's why. All it does is it blocks a receptor for 3-4 hours. That's it, nothing else. And because we do that, because it does that for 3-4 hours, then the whole magic happens. The magic of normal level of endorphins. That is the secret sauce, right? We bring the endorphin levels back up to normal, and then the body has the fuel that it needs to do the myriad of chemical reactions that normal levels of endorphins allow.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us today. I mean, it's fantastic what you've done in such a short period of time.
Well, I look forward to helping more patients, and I look forward to educating more medical professionals.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you. Hopefully next time in real life.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
I'm trying to move my mouse and it's gone to sleep.
You know, I give your story when I lecture.
Do you?
I absolutely. I say, look, there was this woman who was told to park herself in the corner, and she refused to take that for an answer. And because of her, I'm here today.
Any questions or comments you may have, please email me, Linda, Linda, at ldnrt.org. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciated your company. Until next time, stay safe and keep well.